The obsidian walls of the grand ossuary hummed with a low, resonant vibration, a sound that was less mechanical and more biological, the rhythmic thrumming of a massive, living heart buried deep within the planet's crust. Here, in the center of the Vraxan hegemony, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and processed nutrients, a heavy, metallic atmosphere that tasted of old blood and iron. Shadows clung to the high, vaulted ceilings, formed from the ribcage of leviathans long since extinct, their bones fused together to create the architecture of a civilization that worshipped only one absolute truth: consumption. The Vraxan did not build. They grew, they conquered, and they feasted. To them, the universe was not a void of stars and mysteries, but a sprawling, chaotic banquet table waiting to be cleared. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by the bioluminescent glow of the wall veins, sat the high apex, Thrax. He was a creature of terrifying symmetry, his chitinous armor polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the anxious faces of the lesser warlords who gathered in the pit below. Thrax did not speak immediately. He let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating, a tactic of dominance that he had perfected over cycles of ruthless expansion. His mandibles clicked softly, a sound that echoed like cracking ice in the vast hall, and his compound eyes, faceted and glowing with a dull crimson hunger, swept over the holographic projection hovering in the center of the room. The projection displayed a star system, unassuming and yellow, a lonely gravity well located in a sparse, quiet arm of the galaxy that the Vraxan star charts had largely ignored for thousands of cycles. It was a region of space devoid of the high-energy exotic matter that fueled their bioships, a backwater sector where the cosmic background radiation whispered of stagnation. Yet, the scout drones had returned with data that had sent ripples of predatory excitement through the high command. The third planet from the star was rich. It was not rich in the rare minerals or isotopes that other machine-obsessed species craved, but rich in the one currency the Vraxan valued above all else: biomass. It was a verdant blue-green jewel teeming with water, carbon, and a chaotic explosion of life forms. The reports detailed billions of distinct species, a genetic diversity so dense it bordered on the obscene. And dominating this lush garden was a species of soft-skinned bipeds who called themselves humanity. Thrax looked at the image of a human, a digital reconstruction stripped of its context. It looked frail. It lacked an exoskeleton, it lacked natural weaponry, and its sensory organs were primitive, limited to a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. It was, in the eyes of the high apex, a prey animal that had forgotten it was prey. Soft, the word escaped the throat of Warlord Kruk, a massive specimen whose scarred carapace told the history of a dozen planetary genocides. Kruk stood to the right of the throne, his breathing vents flaring with anticipation. Their skin offers no resistance to the slightest blade. Their bones are brittle calcium lattices. They have no venom, no claws, no natural camouflage. They cover themselves in woven fibers to survive their own weather. It is insulting. Kruk spat a globule of acidic saliva onto the floor, where it hissed and steamed, a punctuation mark to his disdain. How has a species this pathetic achieved dominance over such a resource-rich biosphere? It defies the laws of the hunt. In any other system, they would have been culled by the first predator that crawled out of the ocean. They are an anomaly of weakness. Thrax shifted on his throne, the sound of his massive bulk scraping against the bone seat filling the room. Anomalies are delicious, Kruk, Thrax rumbled, his voice a deep subsonic grind that vibrated in the chests of everyone present. They have survived because they have been isolated. The galaxy is vast, and the dark forests between the stars are deep. They have grown fat and complacent in the quiet dark, thinking themselves the masters of their domain because they have never seen a true predator. They have built cities of stone and steel, they have cracked the atom, and they have dipped their toes into the void, but they are children playing in a sandbox, unaware that the wolves are watching from the tree line. Look at their transmissions. Thrax gestured with a clawed hand, and the hologram shifted to display streams of data, radio waves, visual broadcasts, digital noise. They argue, they fracture, they divide themselves into imaginary tribes based on geography or ideology. They war with themselves over scraps while sitting on a mountain of plenty. A divided species is a digested species. We will not just defeat them, we will harvest them. The strategy was simple, elegant, and ancient. It was the same strategy the Vraxan had used to consume the silica mines of the Eta sector and the aquatic empires of the deep void. They would not declare war, they would declare a hunt. A fleet would be assembled, not a picket force, but a swarm, a massive projection of Vraxan power that would darken the skies of the target world. They would bypass the outer planets, ignoring the primitive outposts and gas mining stations, and strike directly at the homeworld. The shock would paralyze the prey. Fear was the spice that improved the flavor of the conquest. When a species realized it was no longer the apex, when the primal terror of the food chain reasserted itself, their societal structures collapsed. Panic would do the work of 1,000 soldiers. The Vraxen would descend, harvest the biomass, process the water, and leave the rock barren, a testament to the hunger of the hegemony. It was the natural order. Stronger organisms consumed the weaker. To deny this was to deny life itself. Preparation for the feast began immediately. The news spread through the Vraxen hives like a fever. The shipyards, grown from vast coral-like structures in the orbit of the capital world, swelled with activity. Bioships were birthed from their amniotic sacs, their hulls hardening in the vacuum, their neural links syncing with the pilots who would guide them. These were not ships of metal and rivets. They were living weapons, genetically engineered leviathans capable of traversing the slipstreams of hyperspace. They hungered just as their masters did. The sheer scale of the mobilization was a message to the galaxy, though no one was watching this quiet sector. It was a gathering of apex predators preparing to descend upon a flock of sheep. The specific number of vessels was irrelevant to the Vraxen mind. They did not count in integers but in density, in the volume of space they displaced. The fleet was a cloud, a storm, a swarm that blotted out the stars behind it. As the fleet moved into position at the edge of the Vraxen territory, preparing for the long jump across the void to the human sector, a subtle unease began to settle in the mind of one individual, High Seer Vale. Vale was old, his carapace graying and brittle, but his mind was sharp, tuned to the subtle frequencies of the cosmos that the warriors ignored. He served as the navigator and the listener, the one who tasted the currents of the slipstream before the fleet committed to the jump. While the warlords sharpened their claws and the soldiers gorged themselves in preparation for the famine of travel, Vale sat in the meditation sphere of the flagship, the World Eater, and listened to the silence of the destination. It was too quiet. Usually, a civilization of the industrial level indicated by the human emissions would produce a chaotic roar of background noise, leaking fusion signatures, erratic communication bursts, the sloppy electromagnetic footprint of a species learning to walk. But as the fleet drew closer to the jump point, the noise from Earth seemed to stabilize. It became rhythmic, organized. It didn't sound like the chaos of a fractured species. It sounded like the steady breathing of a sleeping giant. "You hesitate, Seer?" Kruk's voice broke Vale's trance. The warlord stood in the doorway of the sphere, his shadow stretching long across the curved floor. "The fleet waits for your vector. The hunger grows. Do not tell me you fear the soft ones." Vale opened his eyes, the nictitating membrane sliding back slowly. "I do not fear their strength, warlord. I fear their silence, the transmissions we intercepted. They stopped being chaotic 3 cycles ago. The screaming debates, the cultural noise, it vanished, replaced by a carrier wave of mathematical precision. It is as if they stopped talking to themselves and started listening to us." Kruk laughed, a harsh barking sound. "They detected a scout drone? Good, let them listen. Let them hear the sound of their doom approaching. Fear will marinate the meat. Initiate the jump, Seer. The grand apex commands it." Vale bowed his head, suppressing the shiver that ran down his spine. He keyed the bioneural interface, sending the command to the fleet. The space around them twisted, the stars stretching into long ribbons of light, and the Vraxen swarm tore a hole in the fabric of reality, diving into the slipstream. They were traveling faster than light, hurling themselves toward the feast. They expected to emerge in the Earth system to find a planet in disarray, perhaps hastily scrambling a few primitive fission-powered missiles. They expected panic. They expected the chaotic, desperate flailing of a prey animal caught in a trap. They were wrong. The exit from Slipstream was violent, a rupture in spacetime that dumped the massive Vraxen fleet into the outer edges of the Sol system. The sensors of the World Eater immediately flooded the bridge with data, the organic displays pulsing with red and orange hues. But as the visual feed stabilized, the bridge of the flagship fell into a stunned conf. Used silence. There was no disarray. There were no frantic radio bursts pleading for mercy or demanding identity. The space around Earth was not empty, nor was it cluttered with the debris of a panicked evacuation. Hanging in the void, positioned with geometric perfection between Earth and the arrival vector of the Vraxen fleet, was a structure. It was not a ship, not in the sense the Vraxen understood. It was a monolithic ring, a perfect torus of silver and white metal that seemed to absorb the light of the sun rather than reflect it. It dwarfed the Vraxen flagship. It dwarfed the entire vanguard. It sat there, motionless, silent, a single, unblinking eye staring back at the predators. Behind it, the planet Earth spun lazily, its blue oceans vivid against the black, but the space around the planet was clear. No satellites, no traffic, just the ring. "Report," Thrax bellowed, rising from his command dais, his mandibles twitching. "What is that construct? Why are there no defensive fleets? Where is the prey?" "Sensors are confused Grand Apex," a subcommander stammered, his claws flying over the wet, organic interface of his console. "The construct is emitting no energy signature. It is cold, absolute zero. It reads as a void in space, but its mass. Gravity sensors indicate it has the mass of a small moon condensed into that ring. It is blocking our path to the planet. We cannot navigate around it without entering its gravity well." "A blockade?" Kruk sneered, stepping forward. "A single structure? They think a wall of metal will stop the swarm? They are more foolish than I thought. They hide behind a shield, hoping we will tire and leave. Order the vanguard to breach it. Ram it if necessary, crack it open, and let us see what soft creatures hide inside." Thrax hesitated for a fraction of a second. The instinct of the predator was to strike, to overwhelm. But the stillness of the ring was unnerving. It wasn't defensive, it was waiting. However, the hunger of the fleet was a palpable force. To stop now would be to show weakness. "Send the first claw," Thrax commanded. "Testing probes and bioplasma assault. Melt that ring into slag." The order rippled out. A detachment of several hundred Vraxan attack craft, looking like sleek armored squids, detached from the main body of the fleet. They accelerated with biological fury, their engines burning with green fire. They closed the distance to the ring in moments, their weapon sacks swelling as they prepared to unleash torrents of corrosive acid and concentrated plasma. The distance closed, 10,000 kilometers, 5,000, 1,000. The Vraxan crews screamed their war cries, anticipating the impact, the explosion, the satisfaction of destruction. Then the ring woke up. It did not fire lasers, it did not launch missiles, it simply shifted. The silver surface of the torus rippled like liquid mercury. A pulse, invisible to the naked eye but screaming across every sensor band, emanated from the center of the ring. It passed through the attacking ships. Instantly, the first claw died. Not destroyed, stopped. The green fire of their engines snuffed out. The biological lights on their hulls went dark. The momentum of the ships continued, carrying them forward, but they were lifeless husks. The bioneural links between the pilots and their ships were severed, not by jamming, but by a surgical, precise dampening field that neutralized the electrochemical signals of the Vraxan technology. The hundreds of ships drifted aimlessly, tumbling in the void, completely inert. On the bridge of the World Eater, the silence was absolute. The screens showed the drifting carcasses of their vanguard. There was no explosion, no glory, just a sudden, terrifying negation of power. What did they do?" Kruk whispered, his voice trembling for the first time in centuries. "Did they kill them?" "No," the sensor officer replied, his voice brimming with panic. "Life signs are stable, the crews are alive, but the ships are asleep. The organic cores have been forced into a dormant state. It's a sedative, a planetary-scale sedative." Before Thrax could process this indignity, the communications board lit up. It wasn't a ragged, static-filled transmission. It was a clear, crisp signal that overrode every channel in the fleet, broadcasting directly into the auditory centers of the Vraxan crew through their neural links. It was a voice. It spoke in the Vraxan tongue, but the accent was strange, mechanical, yet fluid, devoid of the clicking undertones of a mandible mouth. "Attention, Vraxan hegemony vessel World Eater and accompanying swarm," the voice said. It was calm, polite, and terrifyingly bored. "This is Sol System Traffic Control. You are currently in violation of Quarantine Zone 44 Alpha. Your propulsion systems utilize dirty bioemissions that are prohibited in this sector. Please power down your main drives and prepare for decontamination and cust. OHM's inspection. If you continue aggressive maneuvers, we will be forced to escalate from non-lethal containment to active sterilization. You have 10 seconds to comply." Thrax stared at the speaker. Traffic control, customs inspection. The audacity was so immense it was almost incomprehensible. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. They were the storm that consumed worlds. And this voice was speaking to them as if they were a minor inconvenience, a pest to be shooed away. "They mock us," Kruk roared, his shame turning to blinding rage. "They disable a few scout ships and think they can dictate terms. All ships, full assault. Target that ring with the heavy biocannons. Burn it from the sky. Do not stop until..." "Belay that order?" Thrax shouted, but it was too late. The collective instinct of the Vraxen had been triggered. The humiliation was too great. The swarm surged forward, thousands of massive bioships accelerating toward the ring, firing a barrage of plasma that could have boiled the oceans of a medium-sized world. The space between the fleet and the ring filled with green death. The ring did not ripple this time. Instead, the space inside the ring shimmered. From the nothingness, a ship emerged. It was not the ring itself. It was a vessel that had been cloaked or phased out of reality. It was a human dreadnought, but it looked nothing like the fragile constructs Thrax had imagined. It was a block of gray geometry, brutalist and unadorned, kilometers long. It had no wings, no fins, no biological curves. It was a brick throne in the face of God. On its side, painted in white letters that caught the starlight, was the name, UNS Indomitable. The Vraxen plasma barrage struck the Indomitable. And it did. Nothing. The green fire washed over the hull and dissipated, absorbed by a shimmering, translucent honeycomb field that flared into existence centimeters from the metal. The energy wasn't deflected, it was eaten. The human ship absorbed the terajoules of energy, fed on it, and glowed brighter. "Energy absorption at 400%, the calm voice returned, this time coming from the dreadnought. "Thank you for the recharge. We were running diagnostics on the shield generators, test complete." Then the Indomitable fired. It did not use plasma, it did not use lasers. A series of railgun batteries along the ship's flank rotated with fluid, synchronized precision. There was a series of flashes, brief and sharp. Across the Vraxen front line, 50 capital ships simply ceased to exist. They didn't explode in fireballs, they shattered. The kinetic impactors, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the organic armor, the bone hulls, and the meat of the ships, transferring so much kinetic energy that the targets underwent instantaneous structural failure. One moment there were leviathans, the next there were clouds of dust and freezing vapor. The violence was clinical, it was precise, it was efficient, it was the work of a species that had turned war into a math problem. "We missed the engines on target 4, the voice said, sounding slightly disappointed. "Correction logged. Vraxen fleet, you have lost approximately 3% of your mass in 0.4 seconds. We can increase this rate of attrition exponentially if you desire. We highly recommend you power down. We wish to talk, not to exterminate. But we are very good at extermination. We wrote the book on it, several books, actually." Thrax slumped in his throne. The silence on the bridge was now the silence of the grave. The predator instinct, the biological imperative that drove them to consume, was screaming in confusion. They were the hunters. This was their feast. But the sheep had just revealed teeth of steel and fire, and the eyes looking back at them were not the eyes of prey. They were the eyes of something ancient, tired, and infinitely dangerous. "Power down," Thrax whispered. "Grand Apex," Kruk gasped, horrified. "Power DOWN," Thrax roared, his voice cracking. "Do you not see? They are playing with us. If they wanted us dead, we would be dust already. Power down the drives. Submit." The Vraxen fleet, for the first time in its history, surrendered without consuming a single drop of blood. The bioengines dimmed, the weapons sacks retracted, and the swarm drifted in the void, waiting for the judgment of the humans. The meeting took place aboard the Indomitable. Thrax, accompanied by Vale and Kruk, was transported via a shuttle that felt too sterile, too cold. They were escorted by human soldiers, armored figures in powered exoskeletons that hummed with quiet hydraulics. The soldiers did not aim their weapons. They held them at ease, projecting an aura of relaxed lethality. They led the Vraxen delegation to a conference room that looked more like a university lecture hall than a place of surrender. One wall was a massive viewport looking out at Earth. Sitting at a long table was a human female. She was small compared to the Vraxen. Soft-skinned, with graying hair pulled back into a severe knot. She wore a uniform of dark blue, unadorned save for a few small bars of color on her chest. She was reading a physical book made of paper. She didn't look up immediately when the giant alien warlords entered. She finished the page, marked it, and closed the book gently. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to the chairs on the opposite side of the table. They were reinforced, clearly designed to accommodate Vraxen physiology. "I am Admiral Solara Vance. I apologize for the rough handling earlier. We have strict protocols regarding invasive species." "Invasive species," Kruk snarled, his pride overriding his fear. "We are the Vraxen hegemony. We have consumed stars. We are the apex of evolution." Admiral Vance looked at Kruk with a mixture of pity and mild amusement. She poured herself a cup of steaming dark liquid from a pitcher. "Coffee," she offered. No, probably for the best. Caffeine is likely a neurotoxin for your biology. To answer your statement, yes, you are apex predators in your pond, but you have stepped into the ocean and you have mistaken a shark for a goldfish. Thrax leaned forward, his compound eyes trying to read the human's micro-expressions. You knew we were coming. You were ready. We have been watching you for 50 years, Vance said, taking a sip of her coffee. Since you ate the Theta sector, we saw the signal ghosts. We analyzed your propulsion. We modeled your psychology. You are biological determinists. You believe that because you are strong, you must eat the weak. It's a very simple philosophy, effective up to a point. But it has a flaw. And what is that? Thrax asked. It assumes you are the only ones who know how to hunt, Vance said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its polite veneer and becoming hard as diamond. You see, Vraxen, you evolved as hunters. You chased prey. You overpowered it. You ate. That is your history. Our history is different. We didn't start as the strongest. We were the prey. We were hunted by cats with teeth like sabers, by wolves, by bears, by things in the dark. We didn't survive by being stronger. We survived by being smarter. We survived by being spiteful. And eventually, we killed all the monsters. We killed them so thoroughly that we forgot they existed. Then, having no monsters left, we turned on each other. She tapped the table and a hologram sprang to life. It showed images of Earth's history. Verdun, Hiroshima, the eugenics wars, the climate collapses, the resource wars. It was a montage of horror, a species tearing itself apart with a ferocity that made the Vraxen's calculated consumption look innocent. We spent 5,000 years perfecting the art of killing things, Vance continued softly. We became so good at it that we almost wiped ourselves out. We had to learn control. We had to build cages for our own demons. We built laws, ethics, diplomacy, not because we are weak, but to protect the universe from us. We are not peaceful by nature, high apex. We are peaceful by discipline. Every day we choose not to be the monsters we were born to be. The Vraxen were silent. They looked at the images of the burning cities, the mushroom clouds, the industrialized slaughter. They realized with a dawning horror that the humans were not sheep. They were wolves who had learned to walk on 2 legs and wear suits. You came here to eat us, Vance said. You thought we were a feast, but you didn't understand what Earth is. Earth isn't a farm, it's a training ground, and it's a fortress. Why did you not destroy us? Vale asked, his voice trembling. With your power, you could have wiped the fleet from the sky. Why disable us? Why talk? Vance sighed, and for a moment she looked incredibly old. Because we are tired of death, and because we need you. The statement hung in the air. Thrax blinked. Need us. We are powerful, Vance admitted. Our technology outstrips yours by centuries. We have cracked physics you haven't even dreamed of, but we are few, we are slow to breed, and we are logical to a fault. We lack vitality. We lack the raw biological drive that you possess. You are a hammer, we are a scalpel, and there is something coming that requires both. Vance pressed a button on the table. The hologram changed. It no longer showed Earth or the Vraxen fleet. It zoomed out of the galaxy into the deep intergalactic void. There, in the darkness between the galaxies, was a shadow. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a fleet. It was a distortion, a patch of space where the stars were disappearing. We call it the entropy tide, Vance said. It's not a species, it's not political, it's a phenomenon, a cosmic rot. It consumes physical laws, it breaks down the atomic bonds of matter. It is moving toward this galaxy. We calculated its arrival 3 centuries ago. It is the great filter. It is why we see so few advanced civilizations. They don't die of war, they erased by the tide. The silence, Vale whispered. The cold I felt. Yes, Vance nodded. You felt the bow wave. We have been building the ring and ships like the Indomitable to hold back the tide. We are building a sea wall against the end of the universe. But we cannot man the wall alone. We need biomass. We need rapid adaptability. We need a species that can grow ships in days, not years. We need a species that understands survival at a cellular level. She looked at Thrax, her eyes locking with his crimson gaze. We don't want to be your food, Thrax. We want you to be our sword. We will provide the shields, the logic, the strategy. You will provide the numbers, the ferocity, the biology. We offer you an alliance, not as conquerors and slaves, but as partners in survival. You can continue to consume the dead worlds, the uninhabited systems. We will even show you how to farm them more efficiently. But you leave the sentient races to us. And together we fight the tide. Thrax sat back, his mind reeling. The scope of it was overwhelming. He had come to rob a house only to find that the house was a fortress and the owners were inviting him to help fight a dragon. The humiliation of defeat was replaced by a strange, new sensation, purpose. The Vraxen had always consumed to survive, but they had never had a reason to exist beyond the next meal. This was a hunt, the ultimate hunt, to hunt death itself. "If we refuse," Kruk asked, though his voice lacked its usual fire. "Then you can try to leave," Vance said simply. "We won't stop you, but the tide is coming, and without our shields, your biological ships will be the first to dissolve. You will be eaten by the dark, just like everything else." Thrax stood up. He looked at the small human woman, this creature of soft skin and terrifying mind. He looked at the image of the encroaching dark. He realized that the Vraxen had been small. They had been petty eaters of scraps. It was time to become something else. "The hegemony accepts," Thrax rumbled. "We will not be the feast, we will be the teeth." Vance smiled a genuine, tired smile. "Good, briefing starts in 1 hour. We have a lot of work to do." And Thrax. "Yes, Admiral. Tell your ships to stop drooling on my space station. It's unsanitary." The alliance between Earth and the Vraxen hegemony was not smooth. It was a friction of cultures, a collision of biology and technology. But it was forged in the fire of necessity. The Vraxen learned that humans were not just cold logicians. They were artists, philosophers, and friends who would die for a comrade. The humans learned that the Vraxen were not just mindless locusts. They were a species of deep loyalty, complex honor codes, and a capacity for adaptation that bordered on the miraculous. When the entropy tide finally arrived at the edge of the galaxy, 10 years later, it did not find a galaxy of scattered, fearful worlds. It found a wall. It found the shimmering, geometric shields of human dreadnoughts, interlocking to form a barrier of light across light years of space. And pouring through the gaps in that shield, screaming their defiance into the void, came the Vraxen swarm. They were no longer just bone and meat. They were armored in human alloys, guided by human AI, and fueled by a unified purpose. The deadliest predators in the universe had indeed found Earth. They had thought it was a feast. Instead, they found a pack. And standing together, the wolf and the locust turned to face the dark, and for the first time in the history of the cosmos, the dark flinched. The battle for existence had begun, but the outcome was no longer certain. For in the cold logic of the universe, there was one variable that could never be calculated: the indomitable spirit of a species that refused to die and the terrifying power of a friend who had your back. The feast was canceled. The war was on. And humanity, with a smile of terrible resolve, was leading the charge.